let's jump right into this explainer. Are you ready to have your assumptions totally shattered? Because the academic paper we're unpacking today is going to completely flip how you watch the evening news. You probably think you're seeing the whole world when you turn on the TV, right? Well, wrong. What you're actually watching is a highly calculated public relations broadcast schedule. Think about it for a second. If you were a politician or a general and you had to launch a highly controversial military strike, how would you pick the time? You'd look at the weather, right? Or maybe enemy troop movements. Nope, not even close. The data gives us a massive reality check here. These lethal strikes are literally scheduled around American TV guides. Listen to this direct quote from a former Israeli military chief, because it hits like a ton of bricks. He basically admitted that if a photograph of a tank on CNN is going to cause a PR disaster, they actually factor that into whether or not the tank rolls out at all. The takeaway is chillingly clear. Modern warfare isn't just fought on the battlefield anymore, it's fought right on your living room screen. Which brings us to our first section, while the world ignores. Let's look at the timing of these shadow operations. Now, this isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's a pattern backed up by over a decade of hard conflict data. The researchers came up with this brilliant zero-jargon metric called the distraction index. Simply put, it's a literal, physical measurement of exactly how distracted the American public is on any given day. And their methodology? Honestly, it's beautifully simple. They didn't use complicated algorithms. They basically just sat in front of a TV with a stopwatch. They timed the top 3 news stories on major U.S. networks like NBC, ABC, and CBS that had absolutely nothing to do with the Middle East. The longer those non-conflict stories ran, the more distracted Americans were that day. Section 2. What exactly is this distraction index? Well, what drives it are massive, predictable events. Think Super Tuesday during the U.S. elections or the FIFA World Cup. Whenever there's a global spectacle, public attention just gets completely sucked away. Moving on to Section 3. The data reveals a counterintuitive truth. So what happens in a war zone when tens of millions of Americans are glued to their screens watching the World Cup? A ceasefire? Absolutely not. The data delivers a huge face slap here. When the U.S. is distracted by major events, the frequency of Israeli military strikes surges by a staggering 14.5%. The exact moment you're celebrating a goal, the conflict is actually escalating. Now, to stay completely objective, the researchers looked at both sides of the conflict, and the results are fascinating. While Israeli military strikes show a highly precise correlation with U.S. television schedules, Palestinian militant attacks show absolutely zero correlation. Look, we're not taking any political sides here in this explainer, but seeing this level of cold, calculated media strategy mapped out in the data is definitely something that makes you stop and think. And the reality of this chart is harsh. As that distraction index climbs higher and higher, it's not just the frequency of attacks that goes up. The number of fatalities spikes dramatically right alongside it. The more American attention is pulled away, the denser the action gets on the battlefield, and the heavier the human cost. But do they time every single attack this way? Well, no. Look at this breakdown. Highly urgent, targeted assassinations, those happen immediately, regardless of what's on the news. But attacks using heavy weapons in densely populated civilian areas, the exact kind that trigger massive PR nightmares, those are strictly delayed. They wait until the whole world turns its head to look at something else before they fire. Part 4. Dodging next-day emotion. This paper drops a completely counterintuitive bombshell here. By carefully timing these strikes, the military isn't actually trying to dodge today's news cycle. They are dodging tomorrow's. At first glance, that makes zero sense, right? Especially since the data shows an attack is 31% more likely to be reported on the exact same day it happens. So if it's going to get exposed today anyway, why bend over backwards to avoid tomorrow? Because of the emotional payload. That's the core insight. Same-day news coverage is usually just cold, hard statistics. Death tolls, locations, facts. But the next day, that's when everything changes. Next-day news is filled with the funerals, the grieving relatives, the visceral anger. It's those deeply emotional, empathetic visuals that actually spark a public outcry. That is the true PR disaster they're calculating to avoid. Section 5. The limitations of perfect data. Now, let's be real. No academic study is completely flawless. We have to acknowledge a few limitations.
First, they could only track a handful of major U.S. networks. Second, you just can't predict a sudden natural disaster, and those will wreck even the most perfectly planned PR schedule. And lastly, the fog of war is very real. It's just not possible for every single military action to perfectly sync up with a media calendar like a clockwork machine.
But even with those limitations, this mountain of data reveals a hidden underlying logic to how our world operates. So, the next time a massive, captivating headline takes over your TV screen, take a step back and ask yourself, while you are being forced to look right here, what exactly is happening in the shadows where you aren't looking?